Let me go introduce briefly our guests. From on the far left is Dr. Marc Tessier-Lavigne. He is the president of Stanford University, a job he began in September of last year. Prior to that, and he is, I think, the 11th president of Stanford. And prior to that position, he was for 5 years the president of Rockefeller University. Before that, he was the chief scientist of Genentech. And before that, he taught at Stanford and University of California, San Francisco Medical School. And he's also an investigator for the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. He is a native of Ontario, and there he went to McGill University, where he won a Rhodes Scholarship and studied at Oxford, getting degrees in physiology and philosophy, got his Ph.D. at University College in London in physiology. And he is today relatively new in his position as the president of Stanford. He's been there just since September, I think that's right, Marc. Okay. Drew Faust is the president of Harvard. She's the 28th president of Harvard. She's also the first woman to be the president of Harvard, and she assumed that position in 2007. Prior to that, she was for about 6 years the president of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study at Harvard, and prior to that, for 25 years, she was a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, where she got her Ph.D., an undergraduate degree from Bryn Mawr, and she's a historian and has written 6 books and an expert on the American South and the Civil War. And her most recent book, many of you may be very familiar with, won the Bancroft Prize, The Republic of Suffering. And on my immediate left is Dr. Michael Drake, who is the president, 15th president of Ohio State University. He has been president for about 3 years of Ohio State. Prior to that, he was the chancellor of the University of California at Irvine for about 9 years. And prior to that, he was the vice chancellor for health affairs for the University of California system. He's a trained medical doctor and ophthalmologist. He's a graduate of Stanford, University of California, San Francisco Medical Complex, and he taught as an ophthalmology professor for about 20 years at the University of California, San Francisco, before going into academic administration. And most importantly, of all of these, he has one distinction that nobody else on the panel has. He is a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Asterisk, the board.
The board. Right, the board.
Minor difference.
Right.
Slight.
But he aspires to be a member of the Hall of Fame because he is actually a guitar player. So maybe you'll get in as a member as well.
One day. We'll look forward to that, yes.
So all of you are obviously leading university presidents. I should have also said that he is going to be the new chairman of the American Association of Universities, which is the main organization for research universities in the United States. He's the vice chairman now and will in October become the chairman of that organization. Okay, so all of you are presidents of great universities. Why did you actually want to be a president of a university? Why wouldn't life be better just being a professor or doing research? Why would anybody want to be a university professor? And if a young person came to you today and said, I'd like to be a university president, would you recommend that they do that? So why don't we start with you and we'll go down.
Yeah, it wasn't ever something that I planned on doing at all. The actual story is I had taken a mini sabbatical, and I was away during my mini sabbatical, and I was nominated for the job of being chancellor at UC Irvine, and I didn't answer the nomination, and but I made it through the first round nicely, and then they asked me again, and I still didn't answer, and they thought I was playing hard to get, I think, but I wasn't reading email on sabbatical. And then finally, I got a demanding note saying, you're selected as a finalist. The interviews are next week. Are you coming? And I said, to what? And that's actually true. And then I did the interview.
Did you think about not even responding to the interview because you were doing so well with not even responding?
On second thought, that might have been a good approach. Honestly, I thought that it'd be a fun thing to go through the interview, but I met with the person who was leading, the president of the system was leading the search, and he was a friend of mine. We worked together because I was vice president, and I met with him ahead of time and said, I don't want to actually do this. I want to make sure you know, but I'll do it for the fun of just seeing what it feels like to be interviewed for something like this. And we had a good conversation, and then 6 weeks later, there I was. So I had I'd had other leadership positions, and it was a fun thing to talk about, but it wasn't a career choice until there was this real opportunity. And really, in the interview, the discussion that we had about things that might happen was intriguing, and we had such a good time that I said, let's try this, and this is 12 years later.
So you enjoy being a university president, and would you recommend it to young people?
Yeah. I think it's we'll hear my colleagues say, it's a wonderful privilege and opportunity, tremendously. It's a life replacement, though. I mean, it takes up your whole life. So so it really came nicely for us at a time that the kids were off in college. And so it's been a great thing for me and for my wife to do together in this phase. It's incredibly rewarding. It's a lot of work, but it's incredibly rewarding and a real privilege.
So Drew, you've been president of Harvard for about 10 years now. Are you happy you took the job? And would you recommend being the president to some young people now? Would they try to be a president of university?
I'm very happy I took the job. It's been just such an extraordinary experience to be part of an institution that supports students and faculty and amazing discoveries, amazing education. I have had my eyes open to the world and to different fields of endeavor beyond the historical training I had in ways that would never have happened otherwise. So it's been extraordinarily rewarding for me. I notice as you read or discussed our bios, I think we all came to this late in life in the sense of having had very active commitments as faculty members and with other agendas in mind. And that seems to me in many ways the right way to come out of university presidency, to be in some sense an accidental president, to start off loving what universities do, loving the research and teaching aspect of it, immersing yourself in it, and then discovering perhaps you can contribute to these institutions that do this extraordinary work in a way that extends beyond your own teaching and your own scholarship.
So you would recommend this to other people, young people?
Sure.
Okay, all right. Marc, would you?
Well, like my colleagues, it was accidental. It wasn't planned. If you told me at the beginning of my career as a scientist running my research lab that a little over a decade later I'd be a biotechnology executive, I would have laughed. And when I started that job, if you told me that a little over a decade later I'd be university president, I would have laughed. It was never planned, but I love the science and the teaching, the research and the teaching in academia, but I had the opportunity to go apply science in the private sector, and I was excited by that, which I love, the application of science to develop therapies for poorly treated diseases. But in the position I had, which was as an executive, I learned that I loved as much working with people and helping them be all that they can be and more. And I think at some point along the way, we each discover that that is as exciting or as fulfilling as one's own personal scholarship. And from then, it was a natural transition when I was asked about Rockefeller and then Stanford, where it is a privilege to have the opportunity to work with such extraordinary people, the faculty, the students, the staff, and really enable them to be all that they can be and more. That's what it's about in this job. So.
But you were at Genentech for a while, and they have stock options and so forth. You don't have any stock options at Stanford, so you ever thought about how much money you left on the table? You don't think about that?
It's really important not to think about that.
So today, what is the biggest problem facing American universities? I know there are always criticisms here and there of universities, but what do you think the biggest challenge and biggest problem for American universities are?
Well, first, I think American universities, and I know we all agree, are really one of the brightest lights in the country. I have this thing I think about a lot. If I think of the things that we really do in this country that are better, where we do it better than anybody else in the world, I think our Constitution is a great Constitution, our system of government, and I think our universities really are the envy of the world for good reason. So we, I think, all realize that we are in incredible positions of privilege, and that's great. There are challenges, and I would say that for me, the balance of access, affordability, and excellence is the nexus of that challenge, that we want to continually be excellent in searching for the best ideas, the best discoveries, the best teaching. We want to be broadly accessible to people because we think this is a great life accelerator for the young people in the country. And then we also want to be affordable. It's a real challenge for American families to be able to afford education. I had students at your two institutions at the same time, and I noticed how much it cost.
Well, let me ask you, right now, since the year 2000, from 2000 to 2015, state government funding of state universities is down by about 30%.
Yes.
Gone down.
Yeah.
So why are state legislators not happy to give more money to state universities because they're producing people who presumably will live in the state and benefit the state?
I'm a strong believer that universities, public and private, public in the case you're speaking of, are really investments in the future. And I think that the legislatures sometimes look at them as a cost and think about what they can do. And I realize the cost pressures they have on their budgets, and so they're looking at discretionary income, and we're squeezed between other things they're fighting with. And so there's a diminishing pie in many cases. And then healthcare costs and other things, prison costs, unfortunately, have been rising, and so we get squeezed. So I think that they are challenged by that. I will say that when I speak with them and their own children are going to school, they're extraordinarily interested in the best quality education there. So they understand it, but I think are challenged.
What's the biggest challenge American universities are facing, and particularly the private universities?
I'd like to build on what Michael said. He had this wonderful triangle that I think is critical of access, affordability, and excellence. And we are dedicated to that, and that's the lifeblood of these institutions that provide such a leadership role in the world. But we're not communicating that effectively to the wider public. And so I think one of our biggest challenges is to explain who we are and what we do and why it matters. And that will determine whether we're able to pursue these three goals, because we need the support of legislators for the publics. We need the support of philanthropy for both the publics and the privates. And right now, we all are very focused on federal support for scientific research, which is proposed to be cut by very significant amounts. And that is essential to our scientific enterprise at our institutions.
Now, you have an endowment that's in the high $30 billion range or something like that, the highest of any university in the United States. Why do colleges and universities like yours need a big endowment? And what about the idea of just taxing that endowment? If you have a big endowment, why don't we, people in Washington like to tax things, why not tax the endowments?
Well, this is something that we need to explain more broadly, is what endowments do. Endowments are working capital that provide every year for Harvard about 35%, 36%, between 35 and 36% of our operating budget. And so the size of that endowment is directly related to the size of the income it generates each year to provide money to support financial aid, to support scientific research, to support professors' salaries. If you diminish that endowment, then that has to come from other sources, such as raising tuition or federal funding or some other reduction in what we're able to do for our students. So to tax that endowment is just to undermine our ability to fulfill the very mission that I think Congress hopes we'll fill, which is to support students and to support the goals of research and teaching.
Harvard has, if you're an undergraduate at Harvard and you come from a not wealthy family, do you still pay the tuition, or what percentage of people are on financial aid?
At Harvard, 60% of undergraduates receive financial aid. And for any individual who comes from a family with income less than $65,000 a year, you pay nothing for tuition or room and board. And up to about $150,000, unless you have some extraordinary assets that you have declared, you would receive tuition, you would receive financial aid, so that you would pay approximately 10%, no more than 10% of your income. So we are dedicated to making Harvard affordable.
And by the way, when you meet members of Congress and persuade them of things you're talking about, do they ever say, well, my son really deserves to get into Harvard, or they don't ever do that? They never, you get lobbied by people when you're shopping, people ever come up to you and say, here's my son's resume. That ever happen, or no?
Well, I don't think any member of Congress has done that, but I have had people come up to me when I'm taking a walk and lobby on behalf of their grandchildren.
Right. Okay. So what do you think the biggest problems are for universities and challenges, Marc?
Well, first of all, I agree with Michael and Drew that access and affordability are very important, and explaining the value proposition of the universities, what it is that we contribute to society. I want to take the third part of that triangle, the excellence part, because I think the exciting challenge for us is to say, how can we make sure that we have the biggest impact possible through our core missions of education and research? Are we doing the most important research today, be it in biomedical science or in the social sciences or the humanities? Are we teaching our students as well as we can? And are we making our educational products available to more students than just those who are on campus? So I'd say I wouldn't call it a problem. I'd say it should be our major concern and focus. I agree with the issues of research funding that undermine that, of course, if it's constrained. And I agree that we have to continue to focus on this issue of making college affordable. We have similar programs to Drew's. You talked about the number of students on financial aid. The number we like to mention is that 78% of our students graduate without any debt. And so, we believe in robust financial aid with similar cutoffs: 65% full ride, $65,000 for family income full ride, $125,000 free tuition, and so forth.
This year you had 44,000 people apply for undergraduate admission. You accepted about 4.5%. So have you thought you're contributing to the depression of people, because you're getting a lot of people that 96% who aren't getting in, they're very depressed. And why is it so hard to get into Stanford? Why don't you expand so you can get more people in? If it's such a great education resource, just let more people in.
Yeah, we've been gradually increasing the size of the undergraduate population, but over the past decade, the number of applications has gone through the roof.
Why are there so many applications these days compared to when the baby boomers were applying?
Part of it is that it's much easier to apply through online mechanisms, the Common App and things like that. We're a residential university, so we're constrained by how many residences we have for our university. We really believe in that. We don't want to deviate from that. We have been increasing the undergraduate population gradually. We're at 1,500 per year. Now we're at 1,700 per year under the previous president, John Hennessy. We're going to be evaluating that. We'd love, there certainly are many more students who are qualified than we can accept because of that constraint. And we'd love to accept more. It's something we're going to be evaluating.
Okay, so let's talk about fundraising, which is really, I've often thought that when you get a Ph.D., instead of learning 2 languages, you should learn how to do fundraising, because people have Ph.D.s and become academics, they spend a lot of their time fundraising. So do you have to spend a lot of time with alums begging for money, or you don't do that much?
We're really actually gratified by the number of people who support us. We just finished a campaign, and we had over 700,000 donors to the campaign, so that made us feel really great. And it was $2.5 billion. We raised a little bit over $3 billion, and we had a room actually about this size of people who'd been our most important supporters. And the reason for the evening was to thank them so much for their support. But I'll say, as I kind of made it around through the crowd that evening, I would go to someone and be saying thank you, and they'd say no, thank you. We really are excited about this university and what it does, and people are very grateful for the ability to be able to help us move forward in some way. So to answer your question, it's really the other way around. Our ability to connect with people and to allow them to work with us on something that's so meaningful has been it's one of the great pleasures of the job.
So if it's so pleasurable, how much more time do you want to spend in that area? But you
like a good crowd. No,
what's the most effective way to raise money from a wealthy alum? What is it, a long process, or you just call them up, or you send them a letter, you invite them over for dinner? What works the best?
I think that we do all of those things to connect with people, and I think that the people who I see most are generally, all of us will see the more significant donors, and they're really making an investment in the institution and really an investment in the future of their community and of their society, and so it's actually a great process. And let me just say that when I first took my job, Ralph Cicerone, who some of you knew was my predecessor in California, and we were meeting right before I was going to do the job, and he said, the donor community are going to become your best friends. And I thought, great, fine, okay. And then after several years, I realized that the people who were the most supportive of the university, who were out there in the world, who'd been successful, became great supporters and friends, and it really was true. So really, it's one of the great pleasures of the job.
Drew, you're in the middle of a capital campaign now. I think it's going to be the largest capital campaign in American university history, and somebody gave a $400 million gift to Harvard. How long did it take to persuade that person to do that? Or was that just one call, or did it take a couple lunches or dinners or whatever?
This was a gift. This is what David is describing as a gift from John Paulson to name and endow our School of Engineering, which became a school. It had existed as a division, but it became a school in 2007, but really didn't have the financial foundation to achieve the goals it hoped to achieve. John Paulson was a graduate of the business school And he's been loyal and generous to the business school. But he thought he could make a bigger difference and have a more important impact for the business school and the university as a whole by making a gift of the kind that he chose to do. So the dean of the business school had met with him over a number of years just talking about what was primary in his mind, what he thought would most help the business school. Then I met with him a number of times. So it was over several years, and I think what was key was John Paulson saw he could do two things at once. One was be loyal to an institution that he felt enormously grateful for, but also give a gift that would have a very significant impact in changing the direction of a part of that university that he felt was extraordinarily
So
important.
does anybody ever call you up and say, by the way, you didn't call me, I'm calling you, I get to give you $100 million or something? No, that doesn't happen very often. People call out of the blue with $100 million or something.
People have called to say they want to give a gift, but it's not usually at that level,
Okay.
right off the phone.
Okay.
I would never turn off my cell phone if that were the case.
So, Mark, at your school, you have a school that's very well known for having entrepreneurs and creating a lot of entrepreneurs. Why should somebody want to get a degree from Stanford? Because the people who drop out seem to do better than the people who actually get degrees. So, have you thought about just having a non-degree kind of thing and just?
It's true there are examples of individuals who have done better by dropping out. I think in general, we find that people have done, in the aggregate, better by getting their college degree and finishing it. So we certainly celebrate those individuals, but we don't think that it's necessarily the right route for everybody, and most students agree.
Okay, let's talk about.
Can I say
Yes.
something about that?
Well, you
We
have two
some of
famous
those folks
dropouts, too.
Yes.
Yes.
Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates. I think we have to remember that they had Harvard to drop out of. And that's an important thing. They came, they met people, they invented Facebook in their dormitory with their friends who became the original launchers of Facebook. So even these individuals who haven't had a complete career at our schools, nevertheless, bring much of our institutions with them and are the products of those institutions, even if they don't actually have
Well, like in Bill Gates' case, he didn't get his degree, and ultimately you gave him an honorary degree, and the same this year with Mark Zuckerberg. Was it hard to convince the faculty to give these people honorary degrees when they couldn't you get
Maybe
out?
this is the wrong incentives, you think?
Okay, all right. So let's talk about student life for a moment. Students for the last 1,000 years or so seem to like to drink alcohol. And roughly every student, I think, in the last 1,000 years seems to be spending a lot of time on alcohol. Not every student, but a lot of them. Right now, the drinking age in our country is set at the age of 21. When I was in college, it was 18. Do you think the drinking age is too high and it forces people to go into drinking ways that they shouldn't, or should it be changed? And is there any chance of changing it, or do you not think it should be changed?
It's not one of the things I worry about. I worry about we all worry about substance abuse, and we particularly the popular pastime of binge drinking, which is so prevalent on college campuses. We think about and how to try to do what we can to make the students safe. I don't think much about changing the age as a way to do that. I don't know. This last year we began selling beer in our football stadium rather than not, which would have been the case. And we found that the number of incidents that we had in the stadium was about a third of the number that we'd had years before, because people would drink very heavily in line or would sequester alcohol in different parts of their clothing to get in. Very inventively, I will say. And so we did have that positive experience, but we've really thought more about educating and supporting our students than about changing the law.
What about drinking? Is drinking a problem at Harvard or not really?
I think drinking's a problem in all of our colleges and universities, that students come often quite inexperienced with alcohol. The biggest focus of danger is among the first-year students in the first weeks of school. But binge drinking continues to be an issue and is one that all of us talk a lot about together and worry about. So, yes.
What, at Stanford, they have any drinking there?
We have the same issues as our colleagues. Again, it's binge drinking of hard liquor shots that really is the thing that we've been most worried about, and we've attended to. We put in new regulations. Last summer, we've seen a drop, in fact, in the statistics related to that, such as alcohol transports. So it's something that we worry about. It's really about education relentless education and messaging, and especially focusing, as Drew said, on that incoming freshman class.
Okay, well, let's talk about another sin, which is drugs. When I was in college, marijuana was a favored drug. Now it seems to be, unfortunately, heroin, cocaine, and opioids. So how serious a problem is this for undergraduates and graduates at your university?
Well, it's a very serious problem, I'll say, for Ohio, more than specifically an issue for the university. It's really a problem for the state of Ohio, which has a dubious distinction of the highest rate of these fatalities nationally, and particularly in rural areas of the state, it's really taken hold. So we have a variety of. First, we have education, as my colleagues were mentioning, that we do for all of our students and much support for them. We also have a research institute that's looking at addiction and different types of drug addiction to try to get in front of this. And I know that our scientists are working on things like non-addictive pain medications so that you can stop this progression. So we think of this more as a broad societal problem than a specific problem for the campus, but included in the education.
Is it getting worse
materials.
or getting better?
Well, I think over the last several years, there's been a spike in particularly opioid deaths, and so it's gotten a lot worse. And we haven't seen a turnaround yet, and so we're really trying to focus.
So have you ever had to
on that.
call parents and say their child died because of a drug problem, or that hasn't happened for you?
We have a large, we have 60,000 undergraduates, and so unpleasantly every month or a few weeks, I have a conversation with a parent about one or another reason that they've lost their child. They're the hardest things that I do. It's a range of things.
You have any drug problems at Harvard, or Harvard is drug-free?
It certainly isn't drug-free, but I would describe it much as Michael has, that the state of Massachusetts is facing an opioid problem, and there's a lot of attention to it across the state. And we have some drug presence on our campus, but it's of far less pressing concern for the community than the drinking issues.
Right. What about drug? You have drugs in California?
Similar picture as what Drew just described. What I will add is that I think all of our institutions also have expend considerable resources supporting students who develop addictions or use the drugs and come for help.
So let's talk about athletics for a moment. Stanford is having Division I athletics and very good academics as well, private university. Do you think that your Division I scholarship athletes should be paid by Stanford because you're getting a lot of revenue at your football games, for example, from these people who are just getting a scholarship? Do you think they should get more than a scholarship?
We really believe in the student-athlete model. We've been very fortunate. We have extraordinary athletes. 21 out of 22 Directors' Cups for the NCAA in the last 22 years. But we set very high standards. We cut no corners. There's no lowering of the bar for those students. They perform at the same levels of other students. If you look at the majors they take, their graduation rates, their GPAs. They're just extraordinary individuals. They do both. We believe in the student athlete, and so we don't want to deviate from that. So no, we wouldn't. We think that paying them would get in the way of them being students first and foremost, athletes second.
Harvard has, is generally not a scholarship, athletic scholarship place. Ivy League does not. But recently you've been competing with Duke for some basketball players, and how do you find it to be at Harvard now, where you're actually getting some athletes who are really nationally prominent? Is that changing your admission standards in any ways or not?
We have very strict admission standards in the Ivy League, and we, as Ivy League participants, all police one another to look at the credentials of our athletes to make sure that nobody's bringing in superstar athletes who don't have the academic credentials. So that is a baseline to which we all have to adhere, and it is the standard you have to uphold is the relationship of your academic credentials of your athletes in comparison with the rest of your student body. So it varies from school to school in the Ivy League, but we're all held to those high standards. We've been very fortunate to compete with Duke, unfortunately not successfully this year for one particular candidate whom I'm sure you as a Duke booster know a great deal about. But I think our secret weapon there is our extraordinary coach, Tommy Amaker, our basketball coach, who believes he is first and foremost a teacher and provides his students, not just his team members, not just with knowledge about how to play basketball, but with a much broader kind of context for their educational experience. And it's very appealing to many
So
students.
at schools like Ohio State, you have the second largest athletic budget in the entire country, I think second to University of Texas. And I assume, but I hadn't checked, but I assume that the football coach is the highest paid person on the university.
Yes.
So does that strike you that, the values are wrong when the football coach is being paid more than the university president?
So, I'm sorry, I'm going to have you repeat the question. I was getting some interference. So I'll say that, go to and echo what Marc said, that we really enjoy the student-athlete experience. We have 1,000 student-athletes on our campus. So some of them, most people here see on TV on weekends. That's great. We have 900 others in a variety of sports. And in fact, our last 2 national championships that we celebrated recently were in pistol and synchronized swimming. And so they're wonderful student athletes. And actually the football team, when it wins, goes to the White House. The other teams come to our house. And so we get a chance to meet these wonderful young men and women. And they're incredible, they're dedicated, they're focused, they're really our pride, and we like them a lot. Football is a big, college football is very popular nationally again. And we believe, the best coach in the country, and really are happy to have him.
So today, the science budgets are being cut by, the budget from the president hasn't come out officially, but it seems as if there'll be some cutbacks in maybe NSF funding, NIH funding, and so forth. Are you worried that we will be cutting research money away from universities, and what are you trying to do about it if you are worried about it?
Well, I began by saying that I thought our Constitution is something that's really been a model for the world, and our research universities, or universities broadly, and our research universities in specific, have been a real model, and particularly since the Second World War, there's been a great partnership between the federal government and our universities that have led to incredible discoveries. I was watching, there was the march this weekend that all of you know, and I was looking at different cleverly written signs, and one that caught my eye said, "Got polio? Me neither. Thank you, science." And I think that there are lots of things that have happened to and for us that helped our society to be better, that are discoveries that have come from our universities. And so it's been the way that we've maintained and improved the quality of life in this country and for people around the world. Marc and I were both on the faculty at UCSF a few years ago, and I remember being there in ophthalmology and first noticing patients I was seeing. I was the consult doctor for the hospital, and I was noticing patients who had a strange candida infection of their eye, and then they get a cytomegalovirus retinitis, an unusual thing, and then they die very quickly. And we learned weeks and then months later this was what turned out to be AIDS, and learned more and more about it, an incurable disease. And then through work done by lots of people, Marc's colleagues and others, we were able to get to things that actually were able, maybe not cure, but to treat these diseases, so people now live for many, many decades. So seeing all that happen, and knowing that it happened from this partnership, means it's one of the greatest and most effective things that we've done as a nation. And to cut back on that, I think, is always short-sighted and ill-advised.
Well, while I have you as an ophthalmologist, is LASIK surgery a good thing to do, or?
How many people in the audience have had LASIK surgery? Well, let's ask them. Oh, no, I don't mean to do that. I'm teasing.
How many people are happy with it?
A good number, and I will say that it works. Patients are the best people to ask. It works well for many, many people. So,
but I notice you're wearing glasses, as I am. You don't use contacts. Are glasses better than contacts?
I did notice that a lot of my colleagues who were doing the surgery were wearing glasses, so I took that as a. Well, never mind. Let me move this. Let me just pass the question on to Drew. I think. So,
okay, Drew, Harvard is a big recipient of federal scientific research dollars, particularly from the NIH, among other places. So how are you convincing this administration that they should keep funding these NIH levels, at these NIH levels?
Well, the president's skinny budget proposes significant cuts to science funding. It proposes about an 18% cut to NIH funding and significant cuts to other important scientific funding as well. NSF, Department of Energy, and so forth. So since January, I've been spending a lot of time meeting in Washington, meeting with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to try to explain what you just said so eloquently, why research support for American universities has been critical to discoveries like how to manage AIDS, how to diagnose a variety of diseases, how to develop the MRI. I mean, there's so many ways in which university science has changed our world. The internet is one of them as well. That's not a health-related one directly, but just so much we take for granted has come out of university research. So I've been trying to make the case to Congress people and also invited a number of them to come see our scientists working in their laboratories and understand firsthand. And a lot of people in Congress are very eager to do that because they want stories to tell. It's the stories of the discoveries, not some abstract statistic, that really has the impact that they think can give them the ground to stand on as they vote for these kinds of measures.
So when you go talk to, I assume it's not hard if the president of Harvard to get a meeting with a member of Congress. Probably you can see anybody you want, I guess.
I've been pretty welcomed. I mean, sometimes there's scheduling conflicts and so forth, but
when you have meetings, you talk about this issue, which they understand, but do they often give you their pet theories of education, of how universities could be run better? Do they ever do that?
Well, they sometimes communicate to me concerns they have about higher education as they listen to my concerns about the legislative agenda.
Marc, you're a scientist, so you have a lot of credibility talking about this with members of Congress, the administration. Have you met with people in the administration yet, the president or other people, and talk about the importance of science funding?
I have been meeting with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. The message that we bring, which is the importance of the research enterprise for the well-being of our nation, is very well received. This is a bipartisan issue. People understand the importance of it. That just to build on Michael's example, polio. There was a time when people thought that expenditures on iron lungs would bankrupt the nation. With HIV, we predicted that every bed in the nation would be occupied with HIV patients. In each case, polio, a vaccine. Many young people haven't even heard of what an iron lung. I bet you in the audience here. HIV, triple combination therapy, which controls the disease. It's not yet a cure. We really still need a vaccine or a cure. We have other impending threats with the aging of the population. Alzheimer's, currently 5 million people in our country afflicted with Alzheimer's. By 2050, it's predicted to be 13 million people. Think of the human suffering, them, their families. The economic cost also is predicted to balloon from $180 billion a year to $1 trillion a year just to take care of those people. So we desperately need cures, therapies and cures, and that will only come through research. So the vitality of our research enterprise is essential to develop those new therapies and cures. It also creates jobs. So it creates cures, it creates jobs, it improves societal welfare, the internet, and other discoveries. This is something that I think we've understood well in society, and so it's a message that is well received.
Let's talk about a problem on college campuses, which is sexual violence. Today, there's more incidents of sexual violence. Do you think this is because people are reporting better than they did before, or they're just more examples of it, or conduct has just changed? What would you say is the reason there's so much more incidents of sexual violence, reported sexual violence?
Well, let me try something here. How many people in the audience know of someone who was a victim of a sexual assault or sexual violence while he or she was in college? This would be not through your professional lives, but just in your personal lives. You know somebody who was a victim. Raise your hands high enough so we can see them. So if we look at the audience, that's a fair, roughly on half the audience of people actually know somebody who had this happen. So it's not a new, and then most of you have not been in college for a while.
For a long time, it looks like.
I'm a guest. Okay. So, but let me just say that it's not a new phenomenon. We think that the AAU, the organization that we all belong to, did an exhaustive study, largest study of its kind across the country, large, small, public, private universities, north, south, and found that there was an incidence of roughly 20% of people said that they had been a victim of one or another type of sexual assault during the time that they were in college. And so I think that the numbers are not so different than they might have been a few years ago. I think that we've done a good job of bringing this to conversation. Our students are much more active in thinking about learning ways that they can intervene or prevent this from happening when it happens, or deal with it appropriately when it does. We hope that that leads to a decrease in the incidence and then a better handling of the cases when they come along.
What about at Harvard?
We were part of this survey and had statistics that were equivalent to most of our peers. It's been a matter of deep concern for me on a variety of levels. I think a lot of the public attention has been to how do we adjudicate these and how do we manage complainants and respondents in those kinds of adjudications. But for me, it seems that the most important thing to do is, of course, handle that well, but prevent it from happening in the first place and understand what the circumstances are, what the conditions are, what the knowledge of individuals needs to be in order to reduce this scourge on our campuses. So we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are the best preventative measures, and also how can we encourage people to go for help. So I think the kinds of realities that you were describing, in which people did not recognize how widespread it was because people were ashamed and didn't think they should talk about it, and therefore didn't ask for help. And so as we see more people asking for help, it looks like our statistics are going up, but actually that's misleading. I think it's because more people are saying, this has happened, and I want to confront it, and I need help.
Do you think the conduct is largely the same as it was 20 or 30 years ago? People were reporting more than it was? Or the conduct, you think conduct has changed, really, than it was 30 or 40 years ago, or it's just reporting is better?
One thing I found striking as we were addressing these issues in a very robust way at Harvard over the last number of years is numbers of women alums from preceding generations, graduated in the 50s, graduated in the 60s, came to me and said, this kind of stuff was going on all over the place when I was in college, but no one dared talk about it. So I don't have any absolute fact or survey or statistics to say things have not, that this was always there, but it was such a powerful message that was delivered to me by numbers of alums about their experience.
At Stanford, you have this problem?
Very similar to our peers as well. And I will say, if you look back in time, it's sort of shocking that we didn't address this until the late 2000s, 2009, 2010, when nationally people started to shine a spotlight on the issue in college campuses, and that led to a number of task force, the initiatives, the study by the AAU that was just mentioned. Right. So it's just, there's been an acceleration of focus on the problem, and I just want to echo what Drew said. The single most important thing, of course, is prevention. And education of our students when they arrive on campus is a focus for us, as I know it is for all of our peers. We are constantly trying to innovate on that front. Our students actually are some of our best partners. They've come up with new programs to help students understand about consent and understand about appropriate behavior.
So all of you are focused on immigration. So let's talk about that for a moment. Right now, all of your schools have people from overseas coming for undergraduate study and graduate study. Why should we, in effect, allow these students to come? Because why shouldn't we have these places available only for American students? What's the advantage to America or to your universities of having foreign students come? You want to
well, as an immigrant who came here on a J1 visa for postdoctoral work, so to get further training after I received all my education outside of this country, I'm still trying to make something of myself, but I hope that you think that it wasn't too bad that you let me into the country.
Well, you might be the exception, but okay, yes.
No, seriously, we've been very fortunate in this country to be able to be a magnet for extraordinary talent from abroad. People have brought their ideas, their capabilities, and that have enriched our country. 51% of startup companies with a market cap over $1 billion were started by immigrants who have come to this country. It creates wealth for the whole country and for everybody here. It's also important at the undergraduate level. We have about 10% of our students are international students. I believe among our peers it's typically 10 to 15%. We think it's very important because it enriches the education of our American students. It's important for them to interact with people from other nations, other cultures. We're living in a global world. Every one of our students today, first of all, they will have extraordinarily long careers because lifespan continues to increase. They'll probably be active into their 70s. They'll have 50 years of active work. And they will be global citizens. They will have to interact with people from every country. It's important that we expose them to that at the same time. So both in terms of enriching our educational offerings to our students, and also in terms of having talent come here to improve our society. It's been the American way, and I think it's served us well.
Okay. Well, these students are so valuable to have. Why don't we keep them here? So when they graduate, sometimes they have to leave the country. So why don't we just say, if they're so great, let's find out ways to keep them. Why don't we do that?
I think that's another issue that universities have been very supportive of, which is H-1B visas and allowing the students that we've invested in and who want to return their talents to this country to make them able to undertake that. I think that openness to international students and faculty and talent is not incidental to who we are, it's fundamental to who we are. And we see it as an essential part of attracting the excellence that we were talking about at the very beginning of our conversation.
So parents who send their children to college, university, often want their children to get a job after they graduate, once they get their graduate degree, if they get that. Do you think that the parents are obsessing over, or students are obsessing over STEM education because they think they can get a job if they have science, technology, engineering, or math? Do you think there's an overemphasis on that? And what happens to the philosophy majors and poetry students? Are they going to get no jobs?
What we find is, I used to be, when I worked at UCSF, I was the Dean of Admissions, and so I looked at people applying to medical school. And they would often say, what's the best major for me to have as an undergraduate if I want to apply to your competitive medical school? And I'd say the best major is something that excites you, something that you're passionate about, something you can do well in and can help you prepare for your future. But I never thought that there was a specific course of study that was better or worse. And one of the great things about the liberal arts basis of our universities is that there are a wide range of courses of study that people can take to expand their minds and do their best to fulfill their human potential broadly. So I wouldn't limit them or guide them toward anything.
Well, you have two children, sir?
I have two children, yes.
If they came to you and said, I'd like to major in philosophy, what would you have said?
I would have said, great. I wanted them to be successful. I wanted to be happy, and so I would have wanted them to get a job, when they were done. But I still think that wherever they focus is that we want to stimulate people to use their minds to create a future. I'm going to say one thing though about you mentioned about students coming from different places and about the diversity of our student bodies and what that does to how that enriches the educational environment that all of us live in. And I teach a class. I have a class I teach for undergraduates, for freshmen. It's a seminar, and it's on the Supreme Court, civil rights, and the music of the civil rights era. And so we have a great time sitting and talking about things broadly. And one of the sessions that I've been doing this for several years, one of the sessions I remember actually had to do with the Civil War a bit, and we talk a little bit about the 19th century to kind of roll us up to the present day. And we were chatting about things, and we were talking about the Civil War, and one of the students said, well, the American Civil War, and then went on with her sentence, and it really caught me that she said the American Civil War. She was from the Middle East and actually was in a country where civil war was actually happening at the time we were speaking. And it caused me to take a step back and rethink about what I was saying and kind of broaden my perspective. And there's small things like that happen in conversations, in classrooms or in dorms or in hallways where people come together from different points of view that make such a difference. And so I think it's really important for the quality of our education that we have people from the world working with us.
Well, Drew, when you meet prospective parents, do they say, what should my child major in if he or she wants to get a job? Or what do you tell them if they ask that?
I do get asked that, and what I'll say is we're trying to educate your child for the second job and the third job and the fifth job, not just for the first job. So we want to give your child certain habits of mind, certain ways of asking questions, of sorting fact from fiction, of analyzing information and data that can be adapted to jobs that we don't even know exist yet. And so how do you get that complex of skills? It can be in a variety of different majors or concentrations. And
Parents
so,
ever say, my child would like to go into private equity, what was the best thing to major in? They don't ask that. Nobody asks that.
usually they don't tell
They
me.
don't ask that, okay. So your children, were they majoring in science as well?
My children majored in computer science, but with also one of them with neuroscience. The other one is now computer science with some humanities. Maybe I can make a few points. First, on the shift towards STEM. 20 years ago, we were concerned that we didn't have enough STEM students. So it's actually been important for our student body to become more educated in the STEM subjects. Secondly, we still have a lot of progress that's needed. If you look, for example, in STEM subjects, in terms of women and minorities in STEM subjects, we don't have enough. We're very happy that at Stanford last year, 25% of the, if you look at women seniors, 25% of them were engineering majors, which is terrific. A massive increase over the past few years, which is terrific for a field that's typically male-dominated. Now, we, as students focus on STEM, we have the same message as Drew and Michael, which is you want to prepare yourself for a life of change. And we want our education to make our students, sure, we want them to be job ready. More importantly, we want them to be future ready. The world is going to change. We know they're going to change jobs. The first job is not going to be their job for long. And it's important for them to have all of those other skills that will enable them critical thinking, the ability to deal with ambiguity, moral and ethical reasoning, and so forth, that will enable them to adapt to a changing job market and changing interests of their own. And then, so for the STEM students, we want that breadth. Certainly for the students who study philosophy or the social sciences, we think it's important for them to be exposed to the sciences as well. We believe in a broad education for all our students. And I might add that if we look at our graduating majors, whatever the subject, they all get jobs. They all get jobs pretty rapidly after leaving Stanford. So it's not a detriment to them to...
You don't have a lot of kids that are unemployed after.
Correct.
And what's the best way to get into Stanford, really? Perfect SATs, first in your class, All-American football player. What is the best way, would you say, to get in?
The advice to any student is, follow your passion. It's the most important thing is to really be passionate about something and go for it. Beyond that, it's very hard to be prescriptive. And
do any of you think American universities are the finest in the world? I think then generally people concede that. But do you think it's inevitable that we'll be the finest in the world in 10 or 20 years? Do you think that's inevitable or in our lifetime, or you think it's not?
I think it's, there's competition for the best ideas around the world in every minute of every day. And I think that the way that we got to be where we are is by working hard and focusing, and I think the way that we'll stay where we are is by doing that. If I can, I have a picture in back of my desk of a painting of Willie Mays, who was a childhood hero, and I got to meet a little later on in life. And I was talking with him once about how he felt after he made the catch in the '54 series against Cleveland, and what would it feel like to make a really great play like that? And he said some things that were profound that I'll share with you next time I speak with you. But
like Fermat's theorem, we have to wait.
What he said, though, and I said, but how did you feel about that? He said, well, that was pretty good, and it's a good play, and my job was to come out there the next day and try and do something a little bit better. And what it made me think is that, you work hard to make yourself the best you can be, but the way you stay there is to try and improve that tomorrow. And I think we have to continue and do that with higher education.
So you think Harvard will be in the same standing in the world 20 years from now?
I think a lot depends on what we do every day. I think a lot depends on whether we can sustain the research excellence that all of us have been talking about, whether we can continue to be the magnet for talent that people wish to come to and think that they can be welcomed and be included in the pursuit of knowledge and learning. So I think it's contingent and depends on the work we do, depends on the kinds of support we're given more broadly, and on our ability to sustain the message that's so important of free expression and pursuit of learning.
Suppose I had a child who got into both Harvard and Stanford. Where should that child go?
Ohio State.
Ohio State. Okay. Great. All right.
That's a very good answer. Good answer.
So I want to thank you much for your conversation, a very interesting conversation. I have a gift for you, a drawing of Washington, D.C. and from 1892. Let me present it to you, or each of you. And
Thank you.
hold this.
Wow, fabulous.
This is for you,
Thank you very much.
and then
It's quite
for you.
fantastic.
This was, okay. Thank you all for a very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.